My name is Rich Brown, and today we're talking about marketing to robots. This is the Marketing PowWow.
The QBD podcast.
The Marketing PowWow.
This is the biggest problem that people are now facing. And of course, Google has been telling us for some time now, write content for humans. And you're fighting in a world market for recognition with your piece of content because a robot somewhere has decided to show it to them. Do you think you really deserve to rank based on the content that you've got on your website? It's not enough on its own, and that's the key point.
Today, we have a very special guest in the studio. Paul Dyer, Director and SEO Specialist at QBD, will be giving us an insight into why great content fails and how search algorithms decide what gets discovered, the robot-first strategy, technical signals that make or break visibility, and how AI overviews and ChatGPT are changing search and what you need to do now. So let's get into the Marketing PowWow.
The QBD podcast.
The Marketing PowWow.
So hi Paul, thanks for being with us today. I know it's something that we've seen a lot with people that we've helped over the time, that they will create their own content. They'll have a really good understanding of even who their audience is. They might have done some research. They've created custom avatars. They've created what they feel is perfect content for their website. They publish it and then nothing happens. They don't get any sort of traction, no visitors to the website. No one really sees the content. And it might not be because that content isn't well written. It's just that they've written it purely for humans and not necessarily for robots. Now, I know marketing for robots is something you've been championing for a long time. Do you just want to allude on that a bit more, and what do you mean by marketing to robots?
Okay, well, great to be here, Rich, and thanks for inviting me along again. I think it's the points you've made there are very typical of what we often see. We talk to existing clients, potential new clients around content strategy, and they understand their business really well, and they can create really good, well-written for humans type content. And of course, Google has been telling us for some time now, write content for humans. And, and we still advocate for that, by the way. We're not saying don't do that. It's very important to get this in perspective. However, there are what we might call the digital gatekeepers. These are robots which exist in all aspects of search, whether it's Google, Bing, or any other search engine. They all have their dedicated robots. And your content that you've carefully crafted, the first person or thing that you need to impress is the robots. And it's the robots that ultimately decide who gets to see your content. So whilst, talking about robot first strategy might sound a bit strong in a world where we're being told to write content for humans, my fear is at the moment that there's an awful lot of people that are not concerning themselves with the algorithms anymore. They're basically saying, well, I'll just write great content. Google told me to do this and it will find me. Yeah. But there are actually so many other things that you need to get right. And in a changing world, we've seen from the early days, actually, going back many, many years ago, if you were running a taxi business, you would go into the yellow pages and your taxi would be A1.
A1 taxis,
because then you would be at the top of the Google equivalent pages, which was the yellow pages. Now, of course, you can't do that, and no one uses yellow pages anymore. In fact, I don't even think they exist. So you've got to fight for your space on the internet and in various search engines and their results pages that they give. So being called AA1 taxes, and it doesn't work. You have to create content that relates to the intent of the search, and you can write great content, but if it's not relatable in the way that an algorithm or a robot wants to see it, it's not going to rank. And this is the biggest problem that people are now facing with the way that they're creating content. What we've seen in the changes where, going back 10 years ago, you could write good, strong SEO-based content and it would rank really well. And you could do okay from that. You still needed to get a lot of other things right, but basically it would work. What we've seen and what we're seeing now, more so in the last couple of years, and increasingly in the last 12 months or so, with the advent of AI-based sort of search engines and AI-driven results across various platforms, not just Google, but across a number of platforms, whether it's voice, whether it's in ChatGPT search or in Bing, Copilot, and so forth. All of these areas are using different algorithms, and you need to understand how content needs to interact with those algorithms to get ranked. So, yes, you're right. I've been talking about marketing to robots for a very long time, back before AI was a thing in our market sector. And it's served us well as a company, because we were able to take almost any piece of content that's been created and then rewrite it without changing the overall meaning or structure of the content, but taking that piece of content and turning it into something that would now index, because we absolutely understand what the algorithms are looking for, and you really have to look at the whole semantics of the way that content's being created to make sure that the search engines have enough to be able to consider this content as worthy. And of course, you're competing against so much content now. Again, years ago, a relatively well-written piece of content, wasn't rare, but it was still something that Google would almost certainly stumble across and index. But now we've got content, really great content being written by great content writers right across the internet, or right across the world. And you're fighting in a world market for recognition with your piece of content. And there's only so many slots available. So it's got really tough. And if you're slipping up on even just the smallest detail in content creation in today's competitive market, unfortunately, you're going to fail. So just creating a great piece of content purely for humans, whilst it's a great start and a great thing to do still, and it's still an important aspect of everything we do in content, it's not enough on its own. And that's the key point.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because the old adage in marketing is people buy from people. And I know we both agree with that, but it's quite interesting. It's almost like people buy from people, but through a robot or via a robot, or there's a robot in between. Can you just talk a little bit more about that sort of journey then that content almost has to go on, and what the journey is that gets the content seen by the human?
Yeah, effectively, when a great piece of content is created, your first, you'll submit that. You might not feel like you're submitting it, but just posting it onto your website and saying, right, there's my great piece of content. It's now been submitted. People will find it. I've built it, so they will come.
Build it and they will come.
which is not a bad thing to do, because you want to write great content and you want to submit that to your website. But the first thing that happens is when you submit that content to the website, provided your website is already indexable. There could be issues around that, of course, but provided the website is already indexable and Google knows about it, the chances are the robots are going to turn up in the next week or two, and they're going to take a look at that piece of content, and they are going to make a judgment call on it. And it's that judgment call that they make which is going to define really where that content goes, potentially for many years. It's going to define how many people will get to see that piece of content. It will make a decision about its relevance. You
said before it's almost like a filing system, isn't it?
It's almost like a filing system. Yeah. And it's sometimes, it's nice to sort of have sort of things to hang your thought process around. And so I often say to people that Google will come along and scan your content. It will always index, but it will put it in a filing cabinet somewhere in the great archives. And then when somebody asks a question, it will decide whether your piece of content is the relevant piece that it's going to display. So basically the robots decide. And that's the key point in all of this, is that the robots decide. You can write a great piece of content on your website, and if you tell somebody about it in a networking event, or you go onto social media and you push that content via social media, yes, you could gain traffic and audience that way. But you can only do that for so long yourself, and you're one person, or even if you're a business with a few people or many people, you're still only a relatively small percentage of the overall traffic that piece of content could receive. So basically the vast majority of people that get to see that content are going to see it because a robot somewhere has decided to show it to them. And when you've got your head around that, and once you've realised that this is actually how content works, and actually this is how SEO works, search engine optimization works, yes, the content still has to be good, written for humans and everything else. That's a given. But unless you are also understanding all of the issues around making sure that both your website and that piece of content can be indexed, it's not going to be indexed. So that journey starts with the creating of the piece of content, and it kind of almost ends up with the search engines indexing it, because they pretty much index everything they come across, but they might index it so poorly that it will just never see the light of day. And as I said earlier, you're competing in a world market now on content.
I was thinking how many pages they're trying to index. Think of how many
millions of pieces of content are being published every day. Even in your own market sector and your own territory, it's hundreds of thousands of pieces of content being published and rescanned and indexed. And so there's only so many slots, aren't there, on page one, if you like to think of it that way, that you can show up. So it's really important that you understand this process quite well, and robot first as a sort of statement is probably a bit strong, but if you ignore the robots and don't consider the way that algorithms are going to work, you will struggle in this sector. It's going to take either a very long time or a bit of good luck to start ranking. And there are other factors, but the key ones really are around the technical SEO, if you like. It is your website. You might have great content on your website, but technically your website is very poor. It could be slow to load. There could be other things around it. There could be errors on the site. There could be some toxic elements around the site that are holding you back. So again, and the human isn't going to see that, but the robots will. The robots will come along and say, I'm sorry, but your site's not quick enough, or there are some toxic issues. Your link
doesn't look good on the phone.
It doesn't look good. And it doesn't feel right. I'm concerned about this website for a number of reasons. There are some trust issues around the website. I'm not sure about the authenticity or even the authority of the people that are creating the content. So there are so many other factors that the robot's going to make a decision around, that unless you understand that and you create the content and actually build your website in line with all of this known information, and this isn't unknown. You can scan a website using popular products like SEMrush and Uber Suggest and so forth, and see where the bodies are buried, if you like. You can see where the problems are. So you can actually unpick much of this yourself if you know what to do. Fixing it, of course, is another issue. But we recently had a client come in who has some fantastic content on the website. They're a real player actually in their sector, but the website was scoring typically around 50% in the technical aspects of the build, and there were many problems with the website. So even though they had great content, just that technical element not being right, which they can't see when they go to their website and look at it, it all looks great. Everything in their garden is rosy. So why isn't content indexing? When we did a scan and we showed them the scan results, they could realize now just how poorly their website was written and how problematic it had become, and how actually this was seriously affecting their growth strategy. So this is another good client for us now, because we're completely rewriting their content for them. We're also rebuilding their website for them. It wasn't built by us, obviously, in the first place, but it's an area where you can fix things, but you know what to look for. You need to know what to look for. And this isn't rocket science in that respect. It's just putting that, understanding how their algorithms are going to work, and understanding that you must feed their own egos, if you like, in order to start to rank.
I think it's interesting because one of a few light bulb moments I've had since working with yourself and at QBD is when you think of it, obviously Google wants to give users a good experience. They want to recommend good websites for you to visit, because if they don't recommend good websites and then you click on them, you think, well, I'm not going to use Google anymore because it sends me to all manner of messy websites. And also that question that I know you've been asking people for many years now working with QBD is when you say to them, do you think your website deserves to be at the top of Google? And that core question really just sort of hammer it home, doesn't it? That it's got to be worth showing, because Google aren't just going to show it to anybody.
Yeah, I mean, Google cares about several factors. I would say that their first care is their own revenue stream. And looking after that, and that's fine. We understand they've got to make money, but they also care very much about their search results, actually, and they do have quite a high ethical code towards only sharing and indexing content that they feel is good and relevant in light of the sort of parameters that you're searching for and so forth. And they want their users to have a good experience, because then they'll continue to use that search engine. And actually, Google for many years have had it all their own way. But we've talked before about this, Rich, where, with the changes, particularly in AI-based search, they're losing a little bit of that groundway.
Yeah, it's become sort of decentralised a bit, isn't it?
It's a little bit, there are other options now for search. And that's only going to increase, I think. So they're very keen to protect what they have and make sure that the search results experience that people get is good. So you're right, and we do often ask, and I've asked many times when people have come in and said, I've got a great website, works really, really well, but I'm not really ranking, and I will often say to them, do you think you really deserve to rank based on the content that you've got on your website? And we've had the opposite scenario to the one we've already discussed, which is they've got technically a brilliant website. It's really, fast. It's indexing well in the respect of, it's Google's happy with the technical aspects of the site, but their content is really poor. Yeah. And, they're answering just a few basic questions around the subject. And they think that's enough. And just having a few hundred words on a page, they feel it should therefore index and they should get results. So, there are different problems associated with this, and we've got to understand that it's when everything comes together that we hit the sweet spot of all of this, that it starts to work. I often talk about the four key signal that we look for, the four key signal categories, if you like, that we look for, and one of the first ones is technical SEO. We have to make sure that technically the website deserves to rank. Again, it's clean, it's not got any errors on it, or very few that don't matter. It's got it's fast, it's mobile friendly, which of course is now a massive factor. In fact, again, we've talked about this before, but Google and many other search engines now will only do the mobile search indexing. And that might sound really weird, but they basically scan the mobile version of your website, and that's what gets indexed. It obviously shows up in all aspects of different platforms. So it can show up on a Mac-based machine or a PC, normal browsers and so forth. But it will often, certainly now, Google has categorically stated for some time now that it will only scan the mobile version of the website. So it looks for that version first. So mobile first sort of, build sort of experience is something that, has to work. And the site has to be fully responsive, and that's the term we use, so that whatever device and screen width and so forth that people are using, the site still performs well. If it doesn't, then Google are just going to largely ignore it anyway, and that's one of the things you've got to get your head around. So technical SEO, if you like, technical content technically the website needs to be really well for the content to sit on. We also have to look at the overall language of the content, and the semantics here are really important. So, it's no good just talking about one thing and keep repeating that one thing. You need to understand that the modern search engines and the robots and the algorithms really understand actually quite a lot about the subject. They're very clever, actually.
It's more sophisticated.
They're more sophisticated than they were before. Yeah. Years ago, you could stick lots of keywords in, even go above recommended density levels.
Good old keyword cramming and get away with it.
Absolutely. Stuff it all in, and Google would love it, and it would rank you somewhere. Do that now, and you're just going to hit the bottom of the list massively. You'd still need to have your sort of keyword strategies, of course, and we still advocate for that. But you have to get the semantics around all of that right. So the language that you're the language you're using and the words you're using are talking about the whole thing, really, and not just the one specific area. So if you sell coffee for a living, for example, on a website, just mentioning coffee and coffee beans isn't enough. You need to talk about the whole process of coffee, where it comes from, the roasting techniques and processes that you might go through, and it understands that if you're talking about all of that, you are probably on authority in the subject and maybe have some expertise in that area. And that's what you've got to look for really in the overall semantics of the way this thing's put together. And that helps to build what we call the authority. And if you don't have authority in the areas that you're writing about, then again, you're less likely to succeed with rankings. Now you have to build authority. You've got to start with something. So, you have to accept that you might start off ranking quite low with some content that you create. But as the authority around both you as an author, if you like, if you're a named individual, writing blog articles on a regular basis, Google will get to know you and it will rank your authority as an individual, but it will also rank the authority, if you like, of the business, the website itself. And it's only when these things start to come up that, again, the robots start to get more interested in what you're doing. And again, the robots kind of decide what your authority level is. Yeah. So you might think, or you might even be, a great authority in the market sector that you operate in. But if that's not reflected by the search engines and they don't believe you, actually, or they don't have evidence to support that, then they're not going to index you as highly, or maybe not even at all. So building authority is really important, and we've got lots of ways of doing that, and we can offer advice and guidance on that tool, till whenever. But obviously, again, great content is at the core of that, but building it with authority and a good, authenticity around that, expertise, if you like, as well, that comes into it is important. And one of the sort of the last point of my four main signals would be the behavioural sort of style that goes on around the content. There's a little story I often tell here, which is where somebody could walk into a tourist information centre, for example, and say to the person behind the counter, "Excuse me, I'm looking for somewhere to go to eat with my family. I've got a small family. We'd like to go and eat at a nice restaurant somewhere. Could you recommend somewhere nearby, please?" And they say, "Yes, go to Sally's restaurant just around the corner here. It's just down the road on the left, rah, rah, rah." Off you go. And you get there. And when you turn up, you don't get served and you're waiting around for ages. Nobody greets you. You're stood at the door waiting for a table. There's empty spaces, but no one's actually coming up to get you. And you wait around for so long, you think, "I'm sorry, I'm just not happy. Doesn't feel right." So you go back to the tourist information and you say, "I'm really sorry, but I went down the road on the left where you said down to Sally's and I couldn't get served and it didn't work out." They say, "Oh, okay, I'm sorry about that. Well, there's a place called Brian's around the corner from here, the other way, which I've got good reviews on. So perhaps go there." So they go there and then they have a great experience. They get served straight away. They have a great meal. They come back to the tourist information and say, "That was a great place you sent us to. Really happy with it." So that only has to happen a couple of times. And then the guy in the tourist information centre never sends anyone to Sally's anymore. They all get to go to Brian's. So it's exactly that. Yep. And if people are referred to a website somewhere, and when they get there, they bounce back quite quickly, and we often hear this term bounce rates, don't we? Which is often misunderstood, by the way, but it's still a factor that we look for. So if the bounce rate is really high and people are just going there, and after a couple of seconds bouncing back to the Google and going to the next link in the Google search results, maybe a little bit further down, and they do that a couple of times, and then eventually they find a link where they stay, and they're on that site. And remember, Google knows everything. Search engines know everything. I was going to say, this is the thing, when I've used that exact analogy a couple of times, so I think it's a brilliant one. And when you explain it to people, and you can sort of see their realization of, oh yeah, Google know, like they do see they see the exactly search, they see the click, they see you come back, they see the next click.
And then they are sort of tracking that.
They're tracking that very activity, and they will know how long you spend on that site. They'll know what pages you go to. They'll know what stuff you're reading and everything else.
If you found the thing,
and if you buy something on that site, they'll know that as well, or whatever. Or you fill out a contact form, or even make a phone call. So basically, they'll collect that data, and then they'll know, and they'll basically say, well, because the top 3 sites that we've been recommending are no longer really performing very well, but the 4th site that we index, people are going there and staying there and actually finding content and actually going through and completing, if you like, a process that they can track. They'll automatically start bringing that further up the rankings. So it's really important that, you know, people, when they come to your website, they hang around.
Yes.
You know, if they're coming to your website, you get lots and lots of visits, but actually people are bouncing straight back off again, then that's a problem. And when we look at bounce rates, it's important to understand that a bounce is considered to be somebody that doesn't click any further. So they come into the website and they read a piece of content, and then they don't go any further. They come back to the search engine. And that bounce could be quite a long time, actually. They might have gone to the website and read an article, but at the end of that article, there was no other call to action. There was nowhere to go, so they just came back. So a bounce in itself is not just a measurement of people that literally bounce straight back. They can still be on the website for a while, but they didn't navigate anywhere else. And that's the important thing to understand about bounce rates.
It's that sort of engagement, isn't it? Because the engagement rate is sort of the
It's the engagement. It's a very good term to use. It's showing, were they really engaging with your content, and then looking for further links. And this is why it's really important to have links, you know, within the content to other relatable content, so that people can move on or
go on that journey,
you know, go through to a call to action, for example. It's really important to get all that stuff right. And again, most people don't.
And I suppose that highlights what you said earlier about that, the sort of technical elements, because it's not just I click the link and then I don't engage with that content, but if I click the link and it does take too long to load, or the website doesn't look good on the phone, then I'm back.
And that's the 4 areas that we looked at. You know, there's the technical aspect of, yes, you know, Google indexed it and I found it, I clicked on the link, but then when I got there, it was too slow to load, so I bounced back anyway. And again, you know, your website might have been performing quite well at some point, but then it slowed up. And, you know, so Google is going to continue to monitor that. So it might have indexed it in the first instance reasonably well, but then technical aspects of your website may well drag that backwards over time and start failing. And again, you know, this is why a lot of our clients we have, where we're doing, you know, what we class as sort of the monthly SEO tasks, is, you know, in some cases every week, in most cases every 2 weeks, we run a scan on their website in the background. It's all done by our systems automatically. And it will flag up any particular site that's got some issues, because things do break. You know, there are plugins on websites that break, that cause issues, that cause something to slow down. So if you're not recognizing that quickly and being able to respond and fix it, just having, you can have a great website indexing really well, but then a technical aspect of the site crashes in some way, which you don't see yourself instantly. And it might be just a couple of seconds delay somewhere on a particular article or a particular page that can suddenly stop that from being indexed. So it's really important to get these things right. It's a battle you're fighting all the time. Really.
All the time with everybody else.
With everybody else, and they might be smarter than you. So you've got to buy a ticket to be in the lottery, as they say. But when you're in it, in this particular lottery, you've got to keep on working at it. And ideally, you need to know enough about this to do it yourself, or you need to work with a partner that is going to be keeping an eye on things for you and then advising you of many things. Actually, you know, things change. They might advise you that there are some technical issues with your website that we need to address or fix, or it might be that actually there are some changes now in the way SEO works, and we need to adopt the content. In the trade, we often call it the Google dance, and you see when you run scans and you look at website traffic history, you often see the peaks and the troughs that come through that. And often indexing can drop when there's been a Google update. So we call it the Google dance. Google's had a dance. It's changed the way it's indexing. Certain sites it doesn't like as much anymore, and they get dropped back. So you need to adapt to those new changes and drag your way back up again. And usually in the case of a few weeks or a month or two, we can get people back to where they were. But you need to understand what's happened to do that.
So it's clear that we need to really understand and speak the language of these robots, as you refer to them as. But let's get a bit more practical. I'll put you on the spot a little bit. What are some of those sort of technical aspects that people need to be aware of to really get their content working for them?
That one of the main things really is what we call crawlability. You mentioned before about, does a website deserve to be ranking and deserve to be served up? And if you've built a website that's really poor in the crawlability stakes, then again, you're making life hard for Google. So having a good crawlable website, and actually you can create lots of sort of little bits and pieces that you can offer up to Google and to other search engines, apparently, which will guide it. So one of the most possibly well known is the robots.txt file, which is a text file which exists on almost every website, and it's a little tiny file that just contains some text that basically is an instruction to robots. And we're talking about robots. Yeah. It's the robots.txt file. Yeah. It's been there forever. It's been around for as long as I can remember, really, this kind of file structure. And it's a simple file that basically says, ignore this, but please index that. Don't go here, but do go there. And it's just a very straightforward text file that will give a clear instruction to a search engine as to what you would like it to index. And actually, often, more importantly, what you would like it to not index. Now, this is a request. This is a file you create, which is a request. It may, and in most cases will, be followed by the robots, but it may not. It's not a guarantee. Ultimately, they will index whatever they feel is appropriate. But if you specifically use the no index strapline, if you like, in content that you've created or areas of the website, then generally speaking, they will not be indexed. And this helps the search engines understand what to crawl and what not to crawl. Bearing in mind that crawling a website costs money. So every search engine that has robots, and there are hundreds of thousands, millions and millions actually of robots that are out there, we call them spiders, if you like, that are crawling across the internet. It costs money to do that. It takes processing power, and all the data that is gathered by that bot needs to come back into the processing arena and be sorted. So actually, by telling the search engines the bits of your website that you would like to index and the bits that you don't want to index or are not important to index, is going to be a great help. So giving a strong, if you like, crawlability aspect to your website is one of the main factors that we would look at. And people end up hiding stuff behind JavaScripts and all sorts of things without realizing it. There's people that understand how, they're sometimes adding a plug-in to a website where something pops up and it's a piece of content that is now in a pop-up somewhere. That might not be indexable. It might not be crawlable. It might be, but it might not be. And if you don't understand that, then that content may or may not ever get indexed. So crawlability of the actual content itself is a really important factor.
Just on that, I've had a few examples recently where we, as you know, we do audits for people's websites all the time. We're always happy to take a look at things to give people an idea. I've been really quite surprised how many times they've had this sort of random plugin that's been put in to sort of help with their SEO, even though it probably doesn't very much, or the pop-up. And it really hinders that crawlability of the website. And then you'd say to them, well, Google's just not even reading this. Like, it's just, and there's almost like an element of just like unlocking the website and making it more available. And I say to them as well, as you've mentioned already, how costly crawling can be. Just think of how many pages Google's got to crawl. If you're making it difficult for them, like, you sort of need to help them out a little bit, don't you?
You need to help them out a lot. And another thing that we often people don't realise the importance of is a sitemap. And having a sitemap file or XML file again is something that the search engines can index and follow. And again, it would then say, okay, the sitemap is is what you want me to index. It's kind of like there could be lots of pages that are on the website that you've got for other reasons that might be, actually you don't want to, to have in a search engine results area. So again, telling Google, what to index, what not to index, and having a sitemap, an XML file sitemap is something that it can follow and will simplify the process of crawling. But it's also important on the technical aspects of crawling is that pages, load quickly enough.
Yep.
Again, if Google is crawling a website and it's waiting for pages to load, it may well just give up and it will not be indexed. You can see, using the right tools, the hosting tools, you can see exactly what pages are being indexed, and therefore some pages you can look at that, and Google is saying it's not indexing it, and you can look at it, and it might even tell you why it's not indexing it, and you can go and fix that. It could be a technical issue. It could be around duplication, for example. It thinks that's a duplicated content page and it doesn't like it. It's canonically put it further down the chain than you wanted it to be. There could be lots of reasons why it's not decided not to index it, but when you understand that, you can go and fix it, and then it becomes crawlable. Yep. And it's that crawlability which is a major factor in all of this, and that leads into the indexability, if you like, of any page, and it's making sure that when it crawls the page, first of all, it's when it crawls, it's crawling your navigation, if you like, and then it crawls across the pages on that navigation. It then needs to understand what that page is about, and this is where your meta descriptions and your meta titling and everything else comes in. If your meta description and your meta titles and your page titling don't really sync, so your meta description says this page is all about apples, but when Google gets onto the page, it finds that actually apples aren't really mentioned at all. It's all about bananas. Then you're not really giving it a steer, and it's making it harder for Google to understand what the page is about. Your H1 structure is a really important, that's the main heading on a page, is really important, as is your H2 and H3 structures. That indexability of those titling, if you like, the titling of a page, is going to give Google a strong steer. And then again, is the H1 and the H2 and the H3 structures that you've got in place logical? And is the content or the content you've created under each of those headings, is that also logically correct for the heading that you've given? If those things don't all add up, then it's going to say, I really don't understand what this page is telling me. It's not logical, therefore I'm not really interested in indexing.
And it's a common mistake, isn't it? We've seen it, and it's almost an innocent, honest mistake, because people that aren't maybe managing their own websites will think, okay, I need to add a new page, add a new blog, so I'll duplicate that page. And they don't realise then they're sort of just copying across things like meta descriptions, and they don't think about changing them, and that's when that disconnect can really kick in, can't it?
Yeah, we develop a lot of websites now, obviously in WordPress, like others. Very popular platform and very powerful platform. It does give the user, the end client who owns the website, the ability to do exactly what you've said. They can log in and say, well, I'd like just to add another page, and I don't want to go back and pay someone to do that. I'll just do it myself. And they don't understand that when they're quite rightly, start from cloning an existing page, which is quite close to what they want to do, and then they go in and make a few changes, change the content, change the headings, and publish it. But that page will now have the same meta titling and meta descriptions as the original page that was created, and they don't understand how to change that. They don't know the importance of it or recognize the importance of it or even how to do it. So they do that over and over again, and you end up with, and we scan websites and we find that there are 30 pages or even 150 pages with the same meta description. Yeah. Because it's just been duplicated over many years, where they've added another blog article, and they haven't actually gone in and changed the settings correctly. And so what was maybe quite a well-indexed site when it was launched and quite a well-structured site when it was launched, over time is being dragged down because Google is now seeing duplicated content issues, whether it's content or whether it's metadata content, but it's duplicated content issues. And therefore it's becoming less important in the ranking and indexing and crawlability issues. It's giving up on that site more and more as time progresses. And we see that an awful lot. Yeah. Sites that were really well delivered, actually, but have been modified over time without understanding the implications of what's really being done. And that's why it's important to make sure that you understand search engine optimization when you are editing or managing a website. You need to understand the implications of what you're doing.
Yeah.
And most people don't.
And that's a point, isn't it? So we've delivered websites for people, and then they've gone away and managed it themselves, or maybe they've engaged with another agency or someone to take it on. If they don't understand it, we look back at it, and you do have to keep that review going all the time. So it's not I've done my website, therefore I don't have to sort of worry about it anymore. You do have to keep checking in, and even if there are people listening to this today that are doing things themselves or are managing or are outsourcing stuff, it's not a bad idea just to get a second opinion on that content, because a lot of the time these business owners, they wouldn't know these things. This is probably the first time they could be hearing it, couldn't they? That is a very common
very common mistake that's made. And another huge mistake that gets made is not using what we would call friendly URLs. So again, the indexing and crawlability and everything else that goes along with websites is the ability for a search engine and for a human to recognize a URL, which is the website address, which is, whatever it is, .com or .co.uk / the phrase. So if you're selling sofas, you want / 2-seater sofas, / 3-seater sofas. And Google understands that, humans understand that. But we see so many websites where it's / ID equals 2347. And that doesn't mean anything to a human. It doesn't mean anything to a robot. And so having that, again, that crawlability around friendly URLs that are well structured and can be canonically connected. And by that, I mean, again, you might have a page that talks about 2-seater sofas on your website, and then you have pages where you've got 2-seater sofas that are, for sale or being shown and described. You might want the search engines to index your main page around 2-seater sofas, where you say basically, we're a manufacturer, we make 2-seater sofas, we're good at what we do, these are the reasons to buy. And you might have lots of strong content there, but Google's decided, or a search engine's decided, that one of your sub-pages is more important for some reason. So it just indexes that. Now you can fix that. You can fix that yourself by basically telling Google that you don't want it to index that page around this content. Canonically, this other page is more important, and therefore it should replace or feature as the main page. Now, provided that content is still good enough and provided it's actually logical, Google will follow that and follow the instruction. Again, you have to understand how to do that, and you have to understand how you tell Google to do that, but it can be done. And this is how we work it out. So having that indexability is really important. And that leads into that statement around the sort of hierarchy of the site and the structure of the site. If you think about it, you can have all of your sofas in one area and all of your dining tables in one area. And you could have pages at the top of that which talk about the importance of those two product areas individually. And again, search engines are very good at following that kind of structure. If you basically don't have a good structure around your website, and literally, if you think about walking into a large room where there's a huge floor space and you've got a massive handful of A4 paper with content on it, and you throw that content up in the air and it all flutters around the room and just settles. So you've got sofas over here and chairs over there and tables over here and so forth, and it's just not structured anymore. Some people build websites like that.
Yeah, they do.
And they build websites with virtually no structure. Everything is in the root directory, if you like. Everything is / on the main URL and then the page. There is no folder structure. There's no siloing of the content or anything else. So you're now asking Google to piece all this together somehow and make sense of it. You could have done a much better job of that in the first place. So that's really important.
I've often explained it to people like you need to think of it a bit like a tree, actually. You have these sort of arms coming off and you create these content clusters.
Yes.
It's all about helping it, making it easier for Google to understand what you're going on
and
about.
That's what navigation is, isn't it? Navigation is a tree in its own right, really. And something that I often remind people of when they come to talk to us about websites is actually websites in their infancy and in their absolute basic sort of understanding of what a website is, it's just words and pictures, and that's it really. Now you can have lots of words and lots of pictures. You can have interactive sort of pictures. You can have moving pictures. You can have video content and so forth, of course. But it's still pictures. Yeah. It's pictures and it's words. And the thing that ties all those pictures and words together is a good navigation structure. Yeah. And as content and websites get bigger and they become more and more complex, the navigation system that you employ is more and more important. And again, we try and make sure nothing's more than a couple of clicks away. If you start having to drill down into the depths to get to a meaningful piece of content, your average user isn't going to go there. No. And probably the search engines aren't either. So again, good structure, your tree navigation, as you call it, is really important to get right. If it's too complicated, users won't enjoy it. So the user interface will be poor, and that will be recognized as poor from a search engine. A search engine will find it poor because it can't index it easily.
Isn't it? Yeah.
And it will also say, well, therefore, if I'm not very good at doing this, users aren't going to be very good at doing this. Yeah. And therefore, it's not a good website. So you're failing on that technical aspect again. The final thing that I'll just mention around this area is what we call a schema markup. And depending on the sort of product or services that you offer, you might be selling tickets for an event. You might be scheduling activities or whatever. You might be having a technical description where dimensions and weights and things like this are really important aspect of what you're doing. And it's really important that you understand how, again, the search engines want to index that kind of data, and the search engines gave us a system called Schema, which you can find out about, in just by googling that subject, and it gives us if you like, marker IDs that we can use. So we can say that when we're talking about an event, for example, and we're talking about the tickets and the prices and the dates when it's on, and the description of the event and everything else, we can use schema markup values for each of those sort of areas of data. And the search engines automatically understand that. And therefore, it can then format that in a search results. So if someone's searching for events in a particular area, they want to know, I don't know, when there's a golf day in a certain area, they could search for that and it would come back using schema marked up data with indexable results, which are very, very concise and show, the information in a concise way in the search engine results page. If you want to be, indexing with that sort of content, you really need to use schema markups. But schema markups can be used beyond just that. It can be used in your generalized content. And again, we're not going to go into this too much today, but we're seeing more and more with the AI search engines and the way that they're working. We're seeing evidence that schema is being used, if you like, to help structure data for that kind of area. So again, these are areas: crawlability, indexability, the hierarchical structure of the website, and the schema markup system that you're using are technically strong considerations that you should be making sure you're aware of and have an understanding of. Or if you don't, speak to somebody that does. Yeah.
That was part 1 of our conversation with Paul Dyer about marketing for robots. Be sure to check out part 2, and you can find that on our website, qbd.co.uk/powwow.
The QBD Podcast.